Hey everyone, welcome back to the Rift Waters Fish Room. Today's going to be a quick video. I'm just going to give you a brief update on my most prized fish, my cichlids from Madagascar, also known as Malagasy cichlids. And there's been some developments, some good news, some bad news too, unfortunately, and we'll go over all that. First, let's go ahead and kick things off talking about this tank, this 125 gallon with Paratropolis neurosati. I have 15 juvenile Paratropolis neurosati in here, and these are a very rare fish, and I was very fortunate to be able to find some for sale. And they're pretty tiny right now. They're definitely undersized for a tank this large, but don't worry, they will grow into it. And these are an aggressive fish, so they're going to need it. Friends of the channel will have last seen these when I actually purchased them and put them in a 40-gallon quarantine tank. So we have now moved them to possibly their forever home, but at the very least, they're home for a long while. This will take care of them for a good amount of time. And this is, I've decorated it with lots of rock and artificial plants and driftwood, because these fish need plenty of spaces to hide. I ended up having to keep these fish, this species, separate from our other Malagasy cichlids, mainly because of their temperature requirements. These fish like it warm. Right now I'm keeping them at 82, maybe 83 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a little warmer than I'm keeping my other Malagasy cichlids at. And that actually kind of segues into the bad news, some of the unfortunate updates that we've had with these fish. You see, when I first purchased these fish, I honestly didn't know that they needed water that warm. My other Malagasy fish, I keep them at about 78 degrees. They do just fine. And these fish are super rare, so there's not a lot of information online about them. But even so, I did find several sources online, several reputable sources, that said they can be kept in that 76 to 78 degree Fahrenheit range. And I unfortunately learned that that is not the case, because when I brought some of these home for the first time, they very quickly started falling apart. They got ick very fast. I haven't dealt with ick in several years. It's typically something you encounter as a newer hobbyist, or maybe someone who hasn't, properly quarantined the fish they've just purchased. I mean, but it can happen to anyone, so I don't want to make it seem like it's only newbies that get it. I got it. I got ick with these fish. And I actually subsequently learned that ick is very common in these species. Well, I had already known that actually, but I didn't necessarily believe it because I had been successfully keeping other Malagasy species and I hadn't had any issues. But once I put these fish in water that was too cool for them, they got ick and nothing helped. They very quickly fell apart. I was only able to save a few of them. And fortunately, I was able to source some more to get my numbers back up. But it was quite devastating to lose the ones I did. And some of the ones that I still have from that first batch definitely took a beating. I'm going to try to find one of them, but when you see them, they look very skinny, very thin. There's one right there. Maybe hard to see on the camera, but he is much thinner than he should be. Beyond the ick, I think they maybe got some parasites. Maybe they had some parasites and the stress of the cooler water just exacerbated the issue. But I've treated these guys with pretty much everything I can think of. Levamisole, praziquantel, metronidazole, just salt. And now I'm keeping them in proper water conditions. So I'm hoping that they rebound. They're either going to start putting some weight back on, or they'll unfortunately continue to degrade. But the ones that I sourced after the fact are doing great. But yeah, that is the update on the Paratropolis neurosati. And that's where the bad news ends, thankfully. Let's switch over to some of the other species, because we have some good news on those fronts. If we come over here to our other 125, which is admittedly not the cleanest right now, but we actually had a couple fish breed. These are the Tychochromis grandidieri, commonly known as the East Coast gold. Of Malagasy cichlids, this is maybe not the most common. That would be the Paratropolis, the starry nights, but this is probably the second most common you'll find. And even so, it's still a very hard to come by fish. But relative to the other Malagasy cichlids, this is one that you're most likely to find for sale somewhere. And we actually got them to breed. Here you can see some of the fry kind of swimming around. They're very tiny. And the parents are rigorously defending them as best they can. I mean, just look at the rest of the fish in this tank are sequestered all the way over to the other side of the 125 because these parents are doing such a good job defending their babies. And they're doing a great job. Unfortunately, they can't protect them all, so we only have a few fry left. And they may not make it, which is unfortunate. But I am excited to put these guys in their own separate breeding tank sometime soon and get some more of them. I think they're beautiful. This is spawning coloration. Normally they will look more like this. Still a pretty fish, but you know, not as vivid as when they're breeding. And again, sorry, the glass is absolutely terrible. I need to get in the inside and scrub it clean. But the other species in this tank are doing pretty well. We have Paratropolis minorambo, which are growing up quite nicely. They're starting to look beautiful. They're still pretty young, but they're getting there. We have the Paratropolis kieneri, who are still pretty young, but they're also growing up quite nicely. They don't develop any coloration until much later in life. And I'm excited, so excited to show you what they look like at that point in the future. But basically, this tank is all good news. Other than looking a mess, all the fish in here are thriving. Some are even breeding. I'm really happy with this tank, with the 3 Malagasy species we have in here. Then we come over to our last 125 gallon that has Malagasy fish in it. And this tank is another tank with just full of really good news. And again, I have to apologize for the glass. This one isn't dirty, it's just a really old tank and full of scratches. I'm going to be replacing it as soon as possible. But the fish we have in here are the Paratropolis damii and the Tychochromis mainti. And they are all growing up. They're doing very well. You know, these are the fish in the other tank I've been keeping at 78 degrees ever since I've had them, and they're doing great. So that's, I was just very shocked when I had the Paratropolis neurosati not do so well in the exact same water parameters. But back to these fish. They're growing up very well. They used to be so skittish. I could never catch them on camera. Now they're much more out and about. These Paratropolis damii, they look so cool when they grow up. It's another fish that doesn't, it's a fish for a patient fish keeper. They don't show color until much later. The Tychochromis mainti, this is not a colorful fish, but it's a cool fish. I love black fish, and they're kind of darting around right now. But I think blackfish are so cool. They get jet black when they're breeding, and even develop some red tint to the fins. And the way I know that is that's the other good news. These have bred already too. Yeah, the Tychochromis mainti have bred, and I pulled the fry from the tank so that I could raise them artificially and get as many survivors as I could. So I have them in a separate tank growing up, and I'm so excited for that. And I'm excited to put those out there, kind of try to spread those fish around the hobby. I think there should be a lot more people keeping these fish. Sure, they're not as colorful as your Malawian cichlids or Tanganyikans or even your big South American cichlids, but they're just so cool. I'm just fascinated by them. Even this day-to-day coloration, where it's just like it's gray with some black, I still think it's such a cool fish. But yeah, that's the update. That's actually the update on all our Malagasy cichlids. So great news on 2 out of the 3 tanks. Unfortunate news on the one tank with the neurosati, but we've rebounded, we've learned from our mistakes. You know, always be learning. You know, that's a good saying. So I expect nothing but good things down the road there. Fingers crossed. But yeah, that's about all we had for today. I hope you enjoyed this quick update. I know it wasn't, the usual edited cinematic videos that I like to put together, but I just wanted to come down to the fish room, shoot some footage, and just talk, candidly with you guys, and share some of the more day-to-day developments that we have here. But hey, I hope to see you next time. Until then, take it easy, everyone.